Welcome to psychosocial development for adolescents, which is about 11 to 19. This is the age when our adolescents and our teens are working in a period of transition. So from being a very protected child who lives with their family, who's making forays into their peer world, but really is going from protected childhood state to more of an independent individual. So in current vernacular, we're kind of calling it adulting. So you're working from being a child to learning how to manage bank accounts, how to find a job, how to write a resume, how to get to work in time, how to drive, how to get into college, how to take a college class, how to write an APA style. So there's a lot of things that go into being an independent individual who's an adult who can manage their own life. So it's really a process, and it becomes longer and longer as we kind of develop as humans. We have quite a long transition process now. Hundreds of years ago, you were an adult in adolescence. You had family of your own. You had farms to run, jobs to do, factories to be in, that type of thing. Now we have a little bit of a longer of a transition process because it's our transition and how we think of children and how we think of adults and the roles that they play in our society is definitely impacted by the time and history that you're living, the culture that you're in, or the world that you live in. If you are living in Papua New Guinea or really remote Alaska or the Amazon basin, your ideas of childhood, children, adolescents, and adults are going to be really different than they are in Southern California in this day and age. So that really changes as well. So when I'm talking about psychosocial development for our adolescents, I'm talking about Southern California in the 2000s. Someday somebody will find this online and they will do in 200 years, they'll write their thesis on, the weird use of YouTube, on college campuses, in the 2000s, something like that. But I'm talking now, the here and the now, kind of in California, in kind of American society culture. And really what our teenagers are doing are they're searching for identity. We're all probably doing this, but they have more of a focus because of their brain and their brain development on what's my goal? What do I value? What are my beliefs? Who am I? What was I? How was I as a child? Do I want to be like my parents? Do I not want to be like my parents? I look one way, but I feel like I'm the other way. All these types of things come into play as we're searching for identity. So Erickson, we talked about brain development last week. We talked about cognitive development and physical development and how kind of our brain development is playing into who we are. So in Erickson, at our adolescent stage, we have this kind of idea of identity versus confusion. So we're figuring out what our personal values are. What does their society value? What do I value? Are they the same? Are they different? What does my family think? What do I think? Are they the same? Are they different? Who I am in multiple roles. I am a mother. I am a wife. I am a daughter. I am a sister. All those types of things. That plays into who I am as an adult, and it also played a part like me being a daughter and a sister and a friend. All played a part when I was doing the transition from childhood to adulthood. So when I was a teenager, I was trying to balance all those multiple roles. So in a healthy identity, you are looking at your drives, your abilities, your beliefs, your experiences. You're trying to have this consistent image of who you are that you present to the world. If you don't get a chance to do that, if you don't get a chance to explore different identities, then you might really not have an identity separate to your family, or you might not have quality peer relationships. So a lot of times we look at our adolescents and our teens, and one day they're a goth, and the next day they're a skater, or they're emo, or they're punk. Getting a chance to kind of explore all those different roles with different peer groups, with different people, or be one thing but consistent over different types of groups allows you to kind of establish your own identity. So you're working with different roles and you're exploring them. You won't really know what you are, what kind of music you like, if you don't listen to a lot of it. You won't know that you're super into country if you haven't tried classical, rap, hip hop, ballet, pop, stuff like that. So in order to find what kind of music you like, you probably need to listen to a wide variety of music in order to be like, yeah, I really like country music. And that kind of is all the things with sports. And that's why we encourage children, especially as they're young adolescents, to play a lot of different sports. How do you know that you're cross country? Maybe you're born to be a polo player because you've got really long arms, something like that. Also within the family structure, if your family doesn't allow you to play with multiple rules, or they don't allow you to have strong peer friendships, you might not separate yourself from your family. And so you would just take the role that your family has given to you. And you won't have a chance to individually explore it. So it's really important that we allow children to explore their identity. Otherwise, they can be confused or even stagnant about who they are and what their role in society is. That was Erikson. So Erik Erikson, quite a long time ago, some of his students, or some people who were motivated or wanted to learn more about kind of role confusion, were Marcia and Finney. So the theorist, Marcia, that's the last name, looked at the process of exploring identity and how we kind of go through different periods. So they took the idea of Erik Erikson and they moved a little bit farther with it. So she kind of took all this information and she looked past it. Finney as well was really interesting as well, in that the theorist Marcia really only kind of was looking at kind of one culture or one ethnicity or one language, how they process identity, more of like Caucasian. And so Finney was like, different ethnicities, different cultures, different races allow children to explore identity in different ways. And they are also going to have to explore their own ethnic identity and what society thinks about their race, ethnicity, and language as well. So when we are kind of looking at that, we are kind of looking at the ideas of, so what I have, this image that I have right here is Finney's look at the process for ethnic minorities, but it's a little bit the same for Marcia as well. Finney just was looking at, what does society think about your ethnicity, race, or culture? What do you think about it as well? So really what it is this is very similar to Erik Erikson. So you need, how do you make a commitment to your ethnic identity, and how do you explore your ethnic identity or your own personal identity? And so these kind of stages tell you how you're kind of going through it. And there's more information on the textbook as well. But it really is the same kind of process. You're just looking at it in more steps than Erik Erikson did. And also you're, for Finney, looking at it through the lens of race, culture, and language. Sexuality is a big one, and this kind of goes hand in hand with their physical development, and that they're entering puberty, their brain is developing, their brain is telling them really crazy things about puberty. But it also, sexuality has to play into the culture that you live in, the time and place that you live in, the family structure that you have, and your family's ideas about sexuality. And then your socioeconomic status as well, and then peers play a huge role as well, seeing what your friends are doing, how they're exploring their sexuality as well. So it's a lot of cognitive brain development plays into puberty, and physical development plays into who you are and what kind of identity you're exploring, both with your family and your peers. So adolescent sexuality and human sexuality as a whole is really, really varied. It's really complex. It's not just cut and dry. There's a lot of different factors that play into your own individual sexual identity. And there are whole classes on sexuality, gender identity, sexual orientation, things like that. We're just gonna scratch the surface of it and say that teenage and adolescent time period is a period when people are exploring the sexual side of their identity as well. The family and the peers are going to have the biggest kind of influence on this, culture as well, but the culture of your sexuality is being reflected with what your family says and what your peers say about expressing your sexuality. I do want to bring up that California actually has a Healthy Youth Act. So if your children are kindergarten through 12th grade, they are having some kind of Healthy Youth Act. So literally, my children are doing this week or next week. I just had to sign a paper saying that they were allowed to learn about this. If you don't want if you do not want your children to learn this, you just say no, or you sign a paper saying no, but they do not have to do this if they don't want to. It's an opt-in. So you opt in to having your children learn about the Healthy Youth Act. I opted in. So in kindergarten, they are learning about their bodies, like what are private parts of their body, who can touch those private parts, what happens if somebody does touch them, what should they do? So keeping their body safe, different kinds of family structures and respect for all different kinds of family structures. And then I think each year it gets a little bit more, they get a little bit more vocabulary words, they get a little bit more information about their own bodies, protecting their own bodies and keeping their own bodies safe. In addition to that, it also covers HIV prevention, sexual health, sexually transmitted diseases or infections. It's inclusive of all genders and sexual orientations. And then there's information which I like about adolescent relationship abuse and sex trafficking. So violence within relationships and sex trafficking, especially for us, we live on a border region. There's unfortunately a lot of sex trafficking along any international border. Doesn't matter which two countries, any type of that, you're gonna have trafficking of drugs, sex, people, all that type of stuff. So I like that, especially in that we're on the San Diego border region. And I think that adolescent relationship abuse, keeping your body safe, and if you are in a violent relationship, how you can get help is really important as well. The great thing about this, like I said, is you have to opt in or out. So if individual family can say that they don't agree with this and they don't want their child to do it, then they don't have to do it. I think they go play outside or something like that. If you do want it, a teacher goes over this type of thing. And as a mom, this is helping me because I'm seeing what my children are trying to learn. And talking about people with sex, especially your own children, is really difficult. It's not like a fun conversation that anybody wants to have. But in my case, I'm seeing what my kindergartners are learning, and I'm trying to echo that at home. Or if I have amendments to it, like I want them to learn more, I want them to learn different, then I can add to it at home, and I can tell them what my own family and my own culture thinks about sexuality in a very, very young age. But once again, the great part about this is there's a lot of personal individuality and responsibility. You can opt in or you can opt out. I do want to talk about California sexuality issues. The great thing, yay, California, is that teen pregnancy is down. So it's gone down almost 80% since 1988. So in 30 years, we've had an 80% drop in teen pregnancy, and I think that's fantastic. Not to say that teen moms can't be excellent mothers, but for the most part, in this transition period, we don't want to add another person to it. Or if they are getting pregnant, it's a full choice of their own. They've looked at all the consequences, they've looked at issues with it, and they have chosen to go ahead and be a younger parent. For the most part, though, we don't want 13 and 14, 15-year-olds getting pregnant. It actually is a health issue. Your body hasn't fully developed or gone through puberty. Your hips aren't as wide as they're eventually going to be. You're typically making poor decisions with your own health, or you're not going to doctor's appointments as much as you should be. And so there are some health risks with very young women getting pregnant. And so that's something that we want to kind of prevent until their bodies are ready to carry and bear children. We also know that since 2011, so just in the last couple of years, it's gone down 11%. So we've seen dramatic decreases over the last 30 years, and then also another 11% since 2011. So that's fantastic for California, and making sure that people are prepared and ready to be parents before they decide that. So STIs and STDs are a little bit not so good in California. It's actually increased and we're higher than the national average. So what does that mean? We know that chlamydia is actually a really big issue. It's increased steadily in the early part of the 2000s. It's decreased a little bit since 2011, but it's still kind of increasing. Gonorrhea as well has increased since 2015. In 2015, there were 121 cases of gonorrhea per 100,000 in youth. That doesn't seem like a lot, but that actually is. Gonorrhea is a really nasty thing to get rid of. It can be resistant to antibiotics. It can not clear up after taking them. You need to make sure that you get really strong antibiotics, which might mess with your whole system. Syphilis as well. Syphilis is really bad as well, especially for women. A lot of STIs and STDs can be asymptomatic in women, so you don't even have like a symptom of it. You could just be going around not even knowing that you have any of these things. With men, you usually get like a burning when you pee, or changes in like your body and how it feels. So you kind of know if you might have these, but for some women, you could be infected by a partner or in kind of some kind of sexual situation and be walking around for years not even knowing that you have it. So unfortunately, chlamydia, gonorrhea, and syphilis have both increased in the 2000s. They are easily treated for the most part. You do take an antibiotic. Sometimes you have to take multiple antibiotics in order to, but once you know that you have it, you really can be treated. Same with HIV as well. That's not treatable. You're going to have this. It's a chronic condition for the rest of your life. It can lead to early death if you don't take care of it, but it's more easily treated than it was. So we really just need to make sure that if teens are engaging in sexual practices, that it's as healthy as possible. So knowing about condoms, birth control, and things like that will allow people to express their sexuality without kind of having an infection that can lead to some serious health risks. Because chlamydia and gonorrhea and syphilis, if they're treated, that's great. You're going to get rid of it with an antibiotic. If you don't have it, it can lead to some really, really kind of terrible things the longer you have it. So if you have it for years and you don't know about it, it can impact your ability to have children in the future. Syphilis, if untreated, can actually affect your brain. So it's really important that people who are engaging in sex engage in safe sex and then are also tested regularly. So we're going to talk a little bit about risky behaviors. So I have a scenario that a 15-year-old girl engages in risky sexual behavior. She smokes marijuana with friends. What would our theorists kind of say about this behavior? So Freud, Mr. Freud from the 1800s, a long time ago, very different ideas about human sexuality and female sexuality. What he kind of said about sex was that it was the genital stage. So in the genital stage, you reach sexual maturity. You are now gone through puberty. You have the physical ability to engage in sex with other people. Psychosocial, our Erikson, our Finney, our Mersha, peer groups. So what your peer group is saying about something, about a thing that you can do, is one of the greatest influences on sexual behavior. So the more that your peers around you are engaging in sexual behaviors, the more that that is going to influence you to engage in them as well. And then cognitive development, I think, really plays into human sexuality as well. So once again, your prefrontal cortex, your limbic system, your amygdala are all kind of working together to make you take bigger chances and engage in risky behaviors. So while you have the ability to think logically and abstractly, you really can't comprehend the meaning or the consequences behind that action. So if you jump off the roof into a pool, you might be able to think that I'm actually going to make it, but you might not comprehend the consequence of the action. Somebody calls the cops on you because you've snuck into the pool after hours. You miss the pool, you hit the ledge with your feet and you get really hurt, you know, things like that. So we have the ability as adults to mostly comprehend the meaning. You might choose not to do it. You might say, okay, this is a consequence and damn the consequence, I'm gonna do it anyway. But we can usually generally see that there's a consequence behind our action and weigh those consequences when deciding to do it. Our teens don't really have that. So they might see that their peer group is engaging in sexual behaviors, and they might choose to do that, even if emotionally they're not ready, physically they're not ready, their family's not telling them they're not ready, but they might engage in unsafe sex practices because they see the peers around them, and they're not unwilling to kind of say, to make fully conscious decisions, weighing the actions of engaging in sexual behaviors. I do want to flip the script a little bit, so we're going to go straight from sex to tech. And unfortunately, there's some middle ground between sex and technology, especially for our teens. But I just want to talk generally about the kind of things that teens engage in and then some of the consequences as well. So with technology, we know that for ages 8 to 12, so our middle childhood, they're spent 6 hours a day on media or technology time. This includes in the classroom and outside of the classroom. So classrooms have some limits on technology. So after school, after school, children are spending like 2 or 3 hours on media, technology, TV, apps, texting, Snapchat, video games, any kind of screen time. For our 12 and 18-year-olds who are adolescents, it's more. It's 3 hours more every day, and that's 9 hours per day, either in the classroom doing something, watching something, being on a computer, being at the computer lab, using iPads in the classroom, and then additional time after school as well, where they're doing cell phones, text messages, internet for schoolwork, Facebook, or any kind of social media. This was a couple years ago. This was 2010, so Snapchat and Instagram didn't even exist. Xbox, playing video games, using a cell, emailing, instant messaging, pictures with a cell, taking selfies, online games, MySpace. I don't even think that exists anymore. The unfortunate thing is that technology is really changing, but the quality research that we produce about technology still takes a long amount of time in order to do this. So as we're releasing information about technology that teens use, it needs to go through a research process. People need to work on it. Lots of people need to work on it. It needs to be reviewed by other people. Then it goes through a journal. Then the journal is published. That can take 3 to 4 years. Meantime, in 3 to 4 years, the pace of technology has changed so much that what we're talking about in that research study might not even be reflected in what we're doing online right now. Then webcams, YouTube, Twitter, virtual worlds like Second Life and Sims and things like that. So there's a lot of different information and a lot of screen things that children can be engaged in. The even scarier thing is that adults are doing more than teens. So spending time at work on screen, a lot of us spend a lot of time on work, and then media as well. So coming home and people being on their tech continues to be an issue. And it's even as adults, we're doing a much poorer job than teens are. So what is a kind of, how can we talk to teens about technology? So we have this front yard test, and really what this is don't tweet it, Facebook it, put it on Snapchat if you wouldn't make a gigantic sign and put it on your front yard. So if you have something that you want to say to the world, considering, is this something that I want all of my neighbors in my city to know that I think? Or if it's not, then I probably shouldn't post it. And so we try to really introduce real life examples. So you have a positive footprint. So a lot of us are on LinkedIn. That's typically the most positive face that we have because that's our jobs. So we want to put all the things that we do. We might post when we're at a job for a really long time or when we get a new job, something like that. So we have positive digital footprints. We also have negative digital footprints as well. I joined Facebook when I was in like 2005 or 2000, I think so. I was still in college. It was still a college thing. You couldn't join unless you had a .edu password on your email. So it was just for college students. And I think at that point, I wasn't at Harvard or anything like that. But it had been generally released from Harvard and the Ivy Leagues into the wider university system. So you still had to be a university student in order to do it. I think I was in grad school at the time. And so we really, a long time, that was a while ago. That was like 13 years ago. We didn't have a general idea about pictures that we post, that it would be a big deal, that those pictures now are online forever. I've since deleted as much as I can on my Facebook profile. I haven't been on Facebook in 8 years. I don't have an Instagram. I don't have Twitter. I don't have Snapchat. I don't have any of those things. But what I did on Facebook, even though it has been deleted, those pictures still will exist forever online in some capability. Somebody could probably find the pictures from a party that I went to in 2006 when I was in my early 20s. So teens need to be taught that there are real life consequences to things that you post online, and you really can't scrub it and get rid of it. It's always kind of going to be there in one component or another. So also, if you ask, we should ask their opinion and their experience, because what they are doing as 17-year-olds is going to be really different. Being, more than 20 years older than them is going to be really different than what I'm doing. So what are their experiences? What apps are they using? What tech are they using? How does it enrich their life and help them with homework and making positive relationships with friends? And then what are the downsides as well? So that's kind of where the sex and the technology are interrelated, and that you can send nudes. You can have those nudes then taken from you and put in the whole wider web in your school as well. So there are unfortunate parts of this where things that you do without thinking, or thinking that it's only going to be for one person, can then have wider consequences as well. And then obviously technology can be used to bully as well. So even if you're not being bullied physically at school, people aren't saying things to you, you can be cyber bullied as well. So that's kind of how we see the intricacies of what teens and technology are doing. And so teaching them how to use technology might be really important. None of my kids are teens yet. I have nephews that are. And so I've been watching how my brother and sister-in-law handle this. How do they talk to their boys about using technology? What kind of guidelines do they have? How do they've put like PG, like they can't see certain amounts of things on Netflix. They look at their browser, even if they clear their browser, they still kind of see the things that they're searching for. So they might be more controlling of their technology than some people. Some people might have a more laissez-faire kind of, kind of do what you want, I trust you. So there's a whole spectrum of how you can control what your children see online. And as a parent, you have those individual decisions about how you're going to talk to your teens about technology and sex, and then also how you have an individual decision on how much you're going to control what they can and cannot see. So we don't have really specific guidelines about that. We're just kind of advocating talking to teens, getting their experiences and what type of things that they're doing online. And then if negative things are happening, like bullying, how we can support them. I think a great thing is this guy called the Mediatrician, and he's now at Harvard University. So he's a pediatrician who also deals in media. And it's Harvard Center for Media Studies. And they have great kind of information like PDFs that you can download and give to families, or you can look at yourself, that gives you some good ways to kind of approach conversations with teens about technology. And it's even for infants and toddlers as well. Because, once again, the research is not where we are with this kind of tech. We've had tech and we've had screens for a while, for like 50 years, but we're still not really sure what the effect is on children as they're developing. We don't know for sure that, if you get 1 hour as an infant, you're going to grow up to be a mass murderer. We don't really know that kind of stuff, and we have a lot of journalists and people writing about it and saying how terrible it is, but we know that screens are a fact of life, and we just kind of have to moderate how we use that. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of research to base it. We don't have a lot of research or a base of information to base our decisions on. So if you are struggling with tech time yourself, or you have children and you don't really know how to limit their tech or limit their screen time, the Mediatrician, you can Google that, or you can Google the Center for Media Studies at Harvard University, and hopefully that's a great resource for you. So in conclusion, the search and refinement of identity takes place across the lifespan. So we know that who we are and who we are in our culture and who we are in our roles as parents or family members or sisters or friends or employees is something that's taking place forever. But adolescents are really struggling with bigger ideas of identity, and they are in more of a process of questioning their values and beliefs. For the most part, I know what my values and beliefs are as an adult, and I struggle to put them into practice. They are going to the very root of the idea of what do I believe in, what don't I believe in. So along with this identity and learning about your identity and struggling with your identity is maybe making risky behaviors and having influences from technology and the new advances in technology, and our peers are really influencing risky behaviors and our identity development as well. All right, I will see you guys online. Thanks so much.